Ambassador Hale, thank you so much for coming to the show. I really appreciate it. I know our time is somewhat limited, so I'm going to skip all of the usual introductions and I'm just gonna dive right into it. Um, when looking at Lebanon today, it can seem eerily similar to where we stood on the cusp of 1983. Though there are some major factors of the time that are no longer applicable today, like the influence of Syria and Lebanon, several other factors are similar. And unlike 83, there is now a popular approval for peace. There's an appetite for peace on the public opinion level. But if you were to put the 1983 and 2026 vis-a-vis each other, how would you describe the overlaps and the differences between then and now, especially in terms of risk and opportunities for Lebanon?
Yes, well, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate the chance to talk to you and to my many friends in Lebanon. I think this is a really crucial moment for Lebanon, as indeed 1983 was in some ways. So the comparison is an interesting one. I think the opportunity, though, for Lebanon's future fulfillment is much greater than was the case in 1983. The United States was very active. George Shultz, as you know, and Phil Habib were quite active in trying to work out an agreement between Israel and the Lebanese so that Israel would pull out, would feel safe in pulling out of Lebanon. And that's not exactly the situation today, although you are right to say that Israel has reoccupied a portion of Lebanon. It really is not, I think, intending to stay. Whether or not there's a peace treaty that comes out of this. I think that their intention is to eliminate the security problem arising from those areas. Whether they succeed or not is another question. But I don't see any territorial ambition there or issue in play. And of course, the other problem we had was that we misread and overreached when it came to Syria. We were getting a lot of warnings, including directly from the Syrians, saying they didn't support the agreement that we were working on. We didn't really consult them fully. We didn't take into account any of their concerns. Schultz believed that they could not be taken into account because Damascus opposed the whole agreement. And he was counting on the Saudis, actually, to somehow arm twist and bribe Assad into agreeing to this thing. And Assad wasn't going to be bribed. And so he really was the factor that destroyed whatever chance that agreement had. Today, as you've mentioned, I mean, Syria is not a negative factor in this equation. Hezbollah's back is broken. They're obviously not completely out of the picture, but their ability to influence events is much degraded. I think the fact that right now we're seeing Iran coming in the defense of Hezbollah instead of the proxy defending the mothership is quite telling in that Hezbollah is really in distress. So I think those are factors that make this very different. I also, I have confidence that the leadership of Lebanon has the backing of the Lebanese people for the most part. The Shia are one exception, of course, and that needs to be worked on. But I think that they have also achieved finally, thanks to Hezbollah's, the degradation of Hezbollah, they've achieved sovereignty in ways that Lebanon hasn't enjoyed even in the early 80s. So I think that sovereignty is not a light switch. It's not going to come on and off. It's fragile. It has to be worked on and developed, and the army needs to obviously strengthen its capacity to deal with Hezbollah and monopolize arms. But the Lebanese leadership, I think, is serious about asserting that sovereignty, which means controlling their borders. If they control their borders, the problem with Israel goes away.
To the degree of their ability to spoil Lebanon's decision making, can we compare the Iranian influence over Lebanon today as Syria's during the 80s? Is it possible to say that so long as, as you mentioned earlier, ignoring Syria's veto to the deal in the 80s led to its collapse, are we ignoring Iran's or not taking Iran's objection or Hezbollah's objection as seriously as we should?
I don't think that Iran has the power that Assad had, by the way, in conjunction with Iran at that time in the 80s. I just, you can debate it, but Assad had deep roots into Lebanese political, economic, and social society. There were a lot of people who were beholden to Syria for their political livelihood. And the mukhabarat system that the Syrians had, Ghazi Khan and that crowd, really, really were extensively in control of many, many parts of Lebanon. I don't see the Iranians today exercising that amount of power, again, because Hezbollah has been so degraded. Now, they want to restore it. They want to get back to where they were before a year ago, or, certainly 2023. And we mustn't allow that. And so we come to your question about shouldn't we be taking this into account? I would say no, we need to be challenging it. And I view, some Lebanese may not like it to be put these terms, but from at least an American perspective, I see that the United States, the state of Lebanon, the Republic of Lebanon, and the state of Israel are actually working together to deal with a common problem, which is Hezbollah and Iran. We all view them as the threat. And one of the most effective ways we can counter that is, of course, through security and disarming Hezbollah, but also establishing the potential anyway, at least the guidelines for potential peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon, because that's the only guaranteed way to stabilize the situation in the south, to provide the kinds of assurances and guarantees of security that would come with that, and give the international community confidence, including the private sector, to invest in ways that would replicate and hopefully exceed anything the Iranians ever did in the Bekaa and in South Lebanon.
So there is no risk, do you believe, that Iran and Hezbollah may have the ability to either spoil the diplomatic track before it fully comes into fruition, or overturn on it later through security, through popular uprising, through chaos?
Yes, the potential is always there, particularly an effort to try to oppose this, but they've not succeeded so far. And as I said, I think that they're actually demonstrating their weakness. They are going to try to stop this. It is a threat to them. But, just the missile barrage that was thrown at Israel by Iran last week was a fraction of what they were doing a year ago or plus. It was 11 missiles, none of which reached their targets. So it's threatening. It needs a response. But I just don't see the power equation being what it was before, which is critically important. So we have to be persistent, though. Well, the thing they want the most is for us to just lose interest. Just drop this, leave it to the Lebanese and the Israelis, leave them alone. And America just, moves on to another problem. That would be exactly the Iranian playbook that they love, because then they can rebuild their strength. Now, there is a problem, and I don't mean to lecture Lebanese about their own politics, but I think as an objective observer, we have to recognize that the question isn't just disarming Hezbollah. The question also is who will have power among the Shia community? How will their voice be expressed through legitimate political and government means in parliament and elsewhere? And those questions, I think, need to start to get debated more than I've heard anyway from this distance.
To stop at that note, do you believe, I know you're a sharp observer of Lebanese domestic politics, so I'm going to ask you a bit of a nuanced question that even Lebanese themselves that are very opposed to Hezbollah struggle to answer. Do you believe that the gamble on Nabih Berri today, the Speaker of Parliament, is it a wise gamble or is it misplaced?
I don't see an alternative option right now to work with. Obviously, Hezbollah's beyond working with. They were always an Iranian proxy. They have become even more so that the IRGC is actually running the show. So who do you turn to in the Shia community? And outsiders can't create an alternative leadership. It has to come from within the forces within Lebanon, within the Shia community. And Nabih Berri is there. And I think that whatever you may think about him, and I've been in meetings or met with him since 1992, since he became speaker, in fact. And I do believe that under the right circumstances, you can work with him. I do believe that he is, in his own way, a believer in the state of Lebanon. That's a state that he wants to take advantage of course. But I do believe that in my meetings, he was always a very strong supporter of the Lebanese army. He was very appreciative of the help we were providing when I was ambassador and I believe subsequently. So I do think that by the same token, though, it's perfectly legitimate to have use this opportunity to have other voices come out. So there's a greater democratic spirit among the Shia than has been the case, because people were intimidated and even assassinated if they lifted their head. And that's why I was disappointed that parliamentary elections were postponed, because I understood the argument was that Hezbollah and maybe Amal were still too strong. I would say, on the contrary, if they were happy to see the elections postponed, I think, because they understood that the shifts were happening in their community. And I wish we'd had a chance to see what way the Shia would begin to go. But it's not too late. And I think that work needs to be done by Lebanese.
I mean, I'm gonna stop at the issue of postponing elections because the pretext given in Lebanon was always to postpone the elections was the security situation, the renewed war that would not allow people to take to the polls. But you brought an interesting note, which is elections had a dimension of also the popularity of Hezbollah and Amal and maybe the integrity of their alliance still. So do you think from an American perspective, some people looking at the postponing of elections as an opportunity to maybe give Hezbollah and Amal more time to drift apart further?
That was an argument I heard some of my Lebanese, friends and contacts make. It's for Lebanese to decide. I'm not sitting here in judgment of this, but I wonder whether that's really was a valid argument, because I think what's going to happen is they're ensconced now for another 2 years in these parliamentary seats, and that is not really a major source of power for them, but it does eliminate the chance for other voices to be heard, or at least reduce that chance. And so I'm concerned about it. The other question that comes to mind is always this debate: well, can Hezbollah continue as a party without its militia or organization? What would be wrong with that? And, the more I think about it, the more I see it as actually not feasible, to be honest with you. And the reason is, in the Lebanese Civil War, the different parties, many of them became militias in order to safeguard their communities and their position in society and so forth. Hezbollah was the other way around. They were a militia that became a party in order to preserve the militia. Whereas the others were parties that became militias and then could go back to being parties because that's always what they were, painful as it was. So they disarmed. This isn't the case with Hezbollah.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think Hezbollah is a security organization first that only entered politics. As you know, they entered cabinet for the first time after Syria's withdrawal. And this is a very interesting debate because a lot of people like to fantasize about an alternative scenario where Hezbollah could be reinvented and maybe refitted around a national project, or as we say, Lebanify Hezbollah, Lebanonite Hezbollah. But I think it is by design something that cannot survive without the use of violence. And you mentioned earlier that there are no Shia alternatives to deal with. Well, this is not a coincidence, because Hezbollah created an entire architecture of suppression and oppression to ensure that there will never be even the slightest crack in the wall. So I fully agree with you on that note, but this here sort of raises an issue with which, when you look, for example, at the way that the European Union looks and classifies Hezbollah, they do draw a distinction between the military wing and the political wing of Hezbollah. So does maybe perhaps a lot of the agreements that are taking place now. They want to deal with the security aspect of Hezbollah, but the political face of it is still completely represented in cabinet. It's completely represented in parliament. Do you think we will soon, come to the conclusion that both political and military wings of Hezbollah have to be treated in the same way?
Yes, I mean, certainly when I was an official in our government, it was a firm foundation in our thinking that there was no distinction between the military and the political wings, or for that matter, the humanitarian and charitable activities of Hezbollah. It's all part of the same organic thing, and it's all directed by Tehran, actually. And so I think to forget that is fundamentally mistaken. That said, I mean, we have an immediate task, which is restoring state sovereignty and monopoly of weapons. And I think you can rally many, many Lebanese around that goal. Starting to then talk about maybe what would be the next phase, which is the political problem, is going to require, I think, a more complex strategy, probably more debate among Lebanese. Ultimately, it's Lebanese who have to do it. Outsiders can't really dictate that stuff. It could become counterproductive if we tried. I call it, writing a new social contract. I mean, I think that the Shia community looked to Hezbollah for defense and deterrence, and Hezbollah failed them in that regard. So that deal is off. And I think deep down, many Shia recognize that. The Israeli actions subsequently have maybe overridden some of those internal reflections, but that's still a thing. So I think that it's up to the Lebanese to decide, well, how's the Shia community going to be reassured that they are still going to be regarded as a significant voice and player inside Lebanon in accordance with their demographics, even without Hezbollah.
I'm going to expand on that point because I think I do agree with you that enabling the Shia community to be able to find alternatives is a collective responsibility, at least on a domestic level. But I think as well that all of the parties involved here, and I think especially the Israelis, also have to think of some behavioral change. I mean, you discuss in the book how the Israeli maybe disproportionate response to war in Lebanon has always backfired because it was able to solidify Hezbollah's popularity base even more. In a lot of ways, they are repeating a very similar scenario. I mean, there's complete depopulation of the south, but even more dangerously than that, they are destroying the infrastructure. They're making an entire fraction of Lebanon unlivable, uninhabitable. And in the Shia psyche, even though I disagree with their conclusions, but I can understand how this elevated threat perception can make them feel that the danger coming from Israel is just too great to even consider an alternative to Hezbollah. And then you look at statements made by Ben Gvir and the far right in the Israeli government, and these are not helpful statements, even though they are maybe designed for domestic use, and maybe even though they discuss territorial ambitions that are maybe unattainable, but they do a lot of damage on the psyche level, which is where I think the real work is going to have to take place eventually. So do you think that we also have to look at Israel to have some behavioral change? And are they also responsible in this mission?
Yes, I've observed much of what you say is a pattern, a recurring pattern. You know, the Israelis have a dilemma in that they want security. I am convinced they do not seek Lebanese territory. On the contrary, they pulled out for a 20-year period. But unfortunately, if you want security, you have to have a partner who's the state of Lebanon on the other side of the border, and that has been absent until lately. And so I would hope that Israelis' enlightened self-interest would draw them to understand the pattern of the past was counterproductive in many instances. It is exactly what the Iranians want, of course, is to see Israeli behavior which is perceived as you described it, that looks like occupation, feels like it's indiscriminate, targets civilians because Hezbollah is, of course, hiding behind their own civilian population. So that's another dilemma for the Israelis. But this is why the talks going on in Washington are so important. And I think that we've learned a lesson that the Lebanese army may not have been quite ready yet for the task that was put on their shoulders for whatever reason. So now we maybe take smaller steps. I think they call it in English a pilot program, where there are going to be areas where everyone's agreed, the Lebanese, the Israelis, Americans, that's Lebanon's opportunity to show the army can clean out any non-state actors, including Hezbollah. I'd like to see foreign assistance coming into those areas quickly so that people see that there are positive consequences for the state's activity. And that Israel would be pulling out of those places. And so that, I think, would be the positive way to get out of this dilemma that you described.
Is this in a way a redo withdrawal on the year 2000? Because as you describe in the book, the Israelis did not coordinate with any Lebanese or local partners when they pulled out, and they essentially just left a huge power vacuum that only Hezbollah was positioned to instantly inherit. When you look at the map of Israeli occupation within Lebanon today, it does resemble, to a very large extent, the same geography that was occupied when they withdrew in the year 2000. So do you think the Israelis are trying to repeat the same scenario so that they can avoid making the same mistake? So pushing Hezbollah out and ensuring that it is the army that fills the gap this time rather than Hezbollah?
Perhaps. I mean, I don't want to pretend that I know exactly what the thinking is. I think it looks like that now. Whether it started that way or not, I don't know. But this is the way I think the United States should be helping to prompt Israel and Lebanon in this direction. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing in these talks in Washington. So I feel I feel that that's not as dangerous as it was in the past. I think that the Israelis recognize the importance of coordinating with the army and with the state of Lebanon. I think there's a lot of confidence in Israel, in Lebanon's political leadership right now. So I think we have a good chance to get this better, at least better than it was in 2000.
Ambassador Hay, you say also in the book that I'm going to be quoting the book a lot. You say that the Clinton administration saw Syria as the most likely expansion for the Arab-Israeli peace project at the time. So their approach was Syria first. Is it safe to say this time that the American approach is Lebanon first in terms of the next breakthrough in Israeli-Arab relations?
I do think that maybe it's not as consciously stated by administration officials, but I believe that their behavior suggests that they understand what I see, which is that Lebanon is the best opportunity right now because it's recovered its sovereignty, because the issues that divide Lebanon and Israel are largely emotional and security related. They're not territorial the way it is with the Golan Heights. It's not existential the way it is with the Palestinians and the Israelis claiming the same territory. So the opportunity is definitely there. I don't like to use the word Abraham Accords. Lebanon has been in successive wars with Israel. Lebanese and Israelis have died. Their families' lives have been overturned in ways that can't be said of the Emiratis or the Bahrainis or the Moroccans, with all due respect to them. So I just think you should craft a formula with Israel that works for Lebanon. And to me, that's going to be something as enduring as an agreement between two countries that goes well beyond a ceasefire and, in fact, encompasses the concept of peace anyway. And then Lebanese can decide what kind of relationship as individuals or communities do you want with your neighbor to the south.
Back to the talks in Washington, critics that oppose the negotiations often oppose them because they say they are coming from a very weak position for Lebanon. They say Lebanon is too weak to negotiate. We have no leverage on the table. Would you agree or disagree with the notion that Lebanon is too weak to negotiate with Israel? And what could Lebanon draw its power from in these negotiations?
I would turn the argument around considerably. I would say that in diplomacy, in my experience, and national security strategies, opportunities like this don't last. Nothing's perfect, but I think you have a government in Israel that wants security and wants to work would prefer to have a Lebanese army in the state of Lebanon handling their security rather than having to do it themselves because they don't want to lose more of their soldiers in South Lebanon. You have an American president who has a strong affinity for Lebanon, who has advisors around him who understand Lebanon. And you no longer have Syria calling the shots in a negative way, and Iran's ability to influence events inside Lebanon is much diminished. So I wouldn't say Lebanon is too weak. On the contrary, I think you have an opportunity here that if you don't exploit it, could lead us right back to the dark past.
You just said something that opportunities like this they do not last. And in your book, there's a critical theme about American diplomacy in Lebanon that sometimes it's overly ambitious and then it's too impatient. What would be the signs that you would look for that America is giving up or losing interest or moving on?
Well, I do think that we've been focusing on Lebanon, of course, as if it's a little bit of a vacuum. The power equation between America and Iran is going to heavily influence events in Lebanon. We all know that. So it's terribly important that the president reestablish deterrence, as he's doing this week. That we don't look like we want to deal more than the Iranians do, because then the price goes up and they think they can exploit that situation, and that we are persistent. So I keep my eye on that theater as the critically important one. That's how America can best help Lebanon, is to make sure that Iran is no longer in a position to exert its influence and intimidation into Lebanon.
I was going to say that this requires a level of disentanglement between Hezbollah and Iran, or can it happen even by overriding a relationship between Hezbollah and Iran?
I think overriding it initially and then hopefully disentangling it simultaneously, which is why all means need to be used to cut those ties.
In your book on page 207, you talk about the Lebanese army and you say that nevertheless, a credible Lebanese army must be in place if the strategic table is ever to be turned against Hezbollah and Iran. And the key word here is if, not when. So I'm going to, based on that line, to ask you about there's a sort of the Lebanese army command is coming under a lot of scrutiny from some of Hezbollah's most hawkish opponents because they describe it as failing to show decisive force vis-a-vis Hezbollah. And the counter argument is that the risk is too high and that this is the last institution that we cannot afford to lose. Do you believe that, or in the American perspective, is a clash between the army and Hezbollah, is it a trap to avoid or is it a transitional must?
It is a critical question. And I want to, as a footnote, point out that I wrote the book. It was published before the 2023 series of events that have happened. So, but I do think that, I think it's a combination of things. I think that my argument as to why we were supporting the Lebanese army, and we were, and continue to do so at a considerable level of financial support and moral support and training, wasn't to make it capable of confronting Hezbollah. It was to make sure that there was an alternative to Hezbollah when the time came. Think of what it would be like right now if there was no army at all, which would have been the case, frankly, without American support. I mean, any army of consequence. So I understand the difficulties of confrontational approach. I know that the Lebanese army is a mirror of Lebanese society. I know that the same fracture points that exist in Lebanon exist within the army. I think that the risk of civil strife may be overstated, frankly. But those are, again, decisions Lebanese need to make. I think that there has to be a political dimension as much as a military dimension to this, in which it's increasingly clear to what remains of Hezbollah's leaders that they have no option but to disarm. And that the army is there. There's a credible threat that if they are not disarmed, that there's going to be IDF action against them. There's going to be potentially LAF action against them. That should never be removed from the table. But there also has to be political arrangements through the Shia leadership that make it clear that there is no way out of this noose. And that's why American pressure on Iran is so important, and cutting those links. It appears that Hezbollah was able to rearm to some degree during the last year-long ceasefire, which is quite shocking. We should have done a better job, all of us, in preventing that. And then you can see where, there may be places where the army does have to go in and clean out some recalcitrant element of Hezbollah on a piece-by-piece basis, and can do that. But I just think keep narrowing the noose, tightening the noose around the neck.
So you do believe that the risk is being a bit overstated of internal collapse?
I do, but I also know the stakes are very high, and those are decisions that Lebanese have to make because they will bear the consequences.
Ambassador Hale, the dead end I feel is that we always arrive to is when we discuss about persuading Hezbollah to disarm. And as you said earlier, Hezbollah wouldn't be able to survive as a political entity without its arms and weapons. And I think they are aware of that. So essentially, what you're asking Hezbollah is not to disarm. What you're asking Hezbollah is to exit, to dissolve itself, essentially. And this means they have nothing left to lose. There's no off ramp. So how can we motivate them to do this when the alternative, even if it is very harsh, would still be more attractive to them, which is chaos and war?
Right. There will always be a hardcore element that is exactly what you described, and for whom survival doesn't even matter, because they don't want to survive in an environment in which they no longer have the ability to intimidate everyone. So that will be where the army has to put the test. But I think they can do it. I saw it when they were dealing with the ISIS problem in the north, and remember the suicide bombings and the incursions into the Bekaa area around Baalbek Carmel. So they can do it, but there has to be a political angle in which the Shia community is not rallying around that hardcore element. That is what I mean, and that takes time. And of course, we don't have a luxury of time.
Yes, I understand. So in closing, I'd just like to ask you a few rapid-fire questions. They're just basically yes or no questions. Are you I know you said recently you're a pessimist. I watched one of your recent interviews, and you said you're a pessimist of nature. So are you optimistic for Lebanon?
I am. That's the context I said that is that, contrary to my nature, I do believe there's a chance.
What would be your advice to the Lebanese president and prime minister?
I think they're doing the right thing. So I would just say, keep it up, keep your courage. These are the bets you're making, the decisions you're making are the right ones. But there does have to be a strategy to bring the Shia into the fold.
Should the Lebanese be worried about a return to a Syrian security role in Lebanon facilitated by the United States? And this is based on a recent comment made by, President Donald Trump. He said we're considering asking Syrian forces to intervene in this situation. And this is a very worrisome line for Lebanese because it draws a lot of bad connotations. So do you think Lebanese should be worried about this?
Well, I wouldn't ignore a comment like that, but I think it was probably not a fully considered statement. The president talks a lot. He likes to talk. He's very transparent. So you know what's on his mind, which is good. And now it's an opportunity to make sure he understands why that's a bad idea.
Final question. Do you think Iran and Hezbollah have proven to be tougher opponents than anticipated?
Depends who's anticipating it. I mean, I was a believer in taking a very tough line with the Iranians. I was surprised, though, that we went to war as aggressively as we did. Now that we're in it, it's important that we not leave the situation half done. We have to finish the job.
Ambassador Hale, thank you so much. These are all my questions. Is there anything that you would like to say or any other topic you would like us to open?
No, just thank you for the opportunity and my all best wishes to you and your colleagues and your audience.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and hope to see you next time in Beirut, maybe.
I hope so too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.